Could you please introduce yourself and your role in short drama industry?
My name is Alicia Read. I am an actor, producer, and now consultant in the vertical microdrama space. So I have had the privilege of performing in over 20 now microdramas, producing the first co-production here with Real Short, their first original here in Canada, and currently bridging traditional film and television professionals with this new format and arming them with the skills they need to enter the space.
And how did you get into short drama industry?
Oh my goodness. Well, I had read about it for a while, actually, for many months before I did my first microdrama. I got scouted on a platform called backstage.com. Someone found me there and went to my agent, and my agent was like, I don't know what this is, Alicia. Why don't you just go and have fun? It looks like a little indie project. And it turned out to be a vertical microdrama. And I was hooked right away.
So how was your first experience when you shooting a vertical drama?
It was interesting. It was for me, it was a bit like an indie set, um, a really fast-paced indie set. But I think by the time I got involved, we'd moved into something that was emerging closer to what we have now. It was incredibly well crewed. Sijing Yang directed me. She's now become really, really well known as not just a director, but also an editor who's trusted by many platforms here in North America, where she's now based. And she was fantastic. We had really great actors, and the material was really interesting. I tend to my forte really is comedy, even though I tend to do a lot of gritty drama and stuff. And so I found myself in this really interesting position of playing this character that was asked to do something really big and over the top, and I loved it. It was a really unique challenge, and like I said, I loved it right away.
It's more similar to the commercials or similar to TV or film, or it's completely different.
No, it's not really either. I mean, I think now at this point, in terms of pacing and producing, it's closer to like a Hallmark movie of the week, a TV movie of the week kind of a thing in terms of, like I said, length pacing, how you would produce it. But the flavor itself of what it is, at least when we talk about a microdrama being its own genre, was nothing like anything I'd ever done, except for something I did in junior high, where I played the evil queen in a Snow White tale, and I made it kind of comedic and very over the top. And a moment pops up for me all the time now because I'm like, oh my God, maybe I was always meant to play this kind of role. Yeah, it wasn't like anything I'd ever touched before. The other thing is, too, where I live here in Vancouver, historically, in film and traditional film and television world, we've been what's called a service producing region. Are you familiar with that phrase
No.
or what that means? So, for the most part, most of our productions have originated in Los Angeles, outside of Vancouver. And so we excel at service producing, which means we've got companies that will bring these projects in, but we make them for the network or for the studio. Of course, we have Canadian originals as well. A lot of those are headquartered in Toronto. But what that means is we make the projects for them, but we don't necessarily cast them all. A lot of the major casting is done in Los Angeles. There's a whole system there. What it means for actors is that the most working actors here in Vancouver are doing day player roles. They're doing very small roles. Sometimes you can get onto a show and they love you and then they bump you up to a recurring. You can build a career here as a lead or supporting lead, but it's not very common. You have to leave Vancouver, just like you have to leave most regions. You got to go to Los Angeles or maybe New York. So for actors here, the pool of work is very small. I came back to the entertainment industry after being out for 20 years. I was active in the late 90s, and then I had a baby and was very, very quickly a single mom. And so my version of responsible was to get into business. I went into beauty and I raised her on my own. And then when she was old enough for me to really come back into an industry like this, I stepped into the industry post-COVID. So a lot of productions had shut down, and then the strikes were happening. So there was like no production. Plus, I came back as an older woman. I'm 51 now. So I was 47 then, into a market that didn't really have a lot going on. And for the most part, when we do have something going on and we're producing for networks and studios, those roles are reserved for first right of refusal really is for union members. And to get into the union, it's difficult. You have to get hired on a union set several times before you can enter. By the time vertical microdrama came to me, and I'd been auditioning like crazy and doing tons of indies and stuff, I kept myself very busy. But there was really no opportunity for me as a non union actor for the most part. And I was almost ready to leave. And then all of a sudden came this wild, crazy genre with material we would never shoot here. We don't shoot a lot of comedy. We definitely don't do telenovela and soap opera. And all of a sudden, I found myself in this amazing of being able to do supporting lead roles and lead roles, really available to most actors here in Vancouver. So when you ask me, is this like anything in film and TV? I would say no, and definitely not in Vancouver, especially those opportunities. And that really is what did it for me too, was just like, okay, now I get to exercise my craft in really unique ways. I'm hooked.
Actually, microdrama opened doors to a lot of people, not only to actors and actresses, but to producers, directors as
Yeah.
well.
I mean, we shoot 10 to 20 here in Vancouver, and I think that's a pretty conservative estimate. We're shooting about 30 to 40 in Los Angeles. But definitely, once I stepped onto it and I saw who was there on the crew side, and I realized, wow, all this time I've wanted to get into a Hallmark or a Netflix feature film. My lighting guy, my DP, these are the people I wanted to work with. I shot in LA and we shot next to work. I tell this story all the time because it's, to me, it's so mind blowing. But like, we were shooting on location literally next door to the Warner Brothers lot. Then we could see from our green room the parking lot, which is massive. And it was like, had barely any cars in it. And it was a weekday. But on my set, we had an Emmy award winning art department. And we had, my hair and makeup was from soap opera land, General Hospital and Days of Our Lives. And I very quickly realized that this was sustaining jobs and sustaining people who had worked really hard to hone their skills in traditional film and TV. And because of COVID, because of the strikes, because of productions pulling out, we're now facing losing their homes and paying their bills. And when I realized the level of professionalism that was going into making these and making a lot of these projects look like broadcast quality, network level product, that's when I connected with now my business partner, Monica Dahlman, to say, hey, I think we need to help educate the industry at large about who's making these and what these are turning into, and also help raise the standards and elevate this community. That's when we partnered together to create the Vertical Film and Short Series Alliance, knowing that we really wanted to protect the livelihoods of these professionals. But to your point as well, give emerging creatives and filmmakers an opportunity to learn about this and gain entrance, because of course the volume is so significant, the turnaround times are so fast. There's never, except for maybe in the very early days of Hollywood, when if you look at those early films and it's like Charlie Chaplin in the front of a car doing his stunts about to fall, like really Wild West of filmmaking days. Certainly at that point, it was a lot easier for people to get into the industry than it has been over the last 100 years. But now we find ourselves in that same place where it's like, never in, I think, our generation has there been a time when you could gain entrance so quickly, develop and hone skills so quickly, have a project get a greenlit and go from concept to market in 8 weeks. Like, it's amazing.
Probably from script to screen, it's about 2 months, sometimes 1 month here in
Yeah.
China. How do you define short drama and what do you think it's their essence?
Well, I would define it as a narrative piece of entertainment that has been shot to watch on your mobile device through an app. It essentially is a telenovela mixed with a Hallmark, at least the microdrama genre. That is an adaptation of something that's been around for a really long time that now has become a personal viewing experience, which is something very unique to what this is.
When you preparing, I'm still back to the performing question.
Mm.
So when you're approaching the character for a microdrama, how do you prepare for the role and how do you relate to this character?
So, of course, as an artist, I have a process, where I work with the script. I do as much script analysis as I can. The thing about vertical microdrama is similar to like a Hallmark is that there really is no subtext. There's no sort of read between the lines. It's all on the paper for you. So it really isn't necessarily a question of diving into a character and really having to do all that work of backstory and objective that you might do with something maybe a little bit more sophisticated. And at the same time, we often don't have very much prep. Like I just booked my next role. I start shooting on Sunday. So today is Monday. And that feels like a long time to sit with a 97, 120 page script. We don't often have a lot of time to develop character necessarily through script analysis. The thing about playing a villain, which I most often do, is that in a microdrama, the villain does not have an arc. They don't really have a journey. Their character doesn't have a lot of nuance either. And as well, when we shoot these, a lot of the nuance in our performances may never actually be included because it's all portraiture, it's all the sort of micro moment, and then you're moving on. So knowing that as a performer means I can prioritize things differently than I would with a script that we may shoot horizontally and I might have more preparatory time. And because I know that, for me, it's more about, first of all, I just need to know what's happening in the scene, what my role as the character is. What am I doing to further this storyline along? And there's a bit of freedom in there as an actor because I think as actors, many of us tend to overthink things. So a lot of us actually end up over preparing, which can sometimes screw your head up because if you overanalyze and if you over rehearse before you get to camera, everything's going to change when you're there because your co-stars are going to give you something. You're going to be in a different environment than you were in your head. And your director also may want something very different from you that you saw in the script. So I kind of like that we don't have a lot of prep time, that I can just get dropped in and sort of like play around. But I think really that's the difference for a performer in a vertical microdrama is that you have to know that this is your frame and all you're doing is moving a story along. And it's almost more about how you look and your reactions to things than it is even about your lines.
As a character, there will be a reason for this character to be
Oh,
in
yeah.
the show, right?
Oh, 100%. And of course, that's where you have to know what is the scene about and what is my role here in this story? How am I fitting into this scene to make sure it goes from here to here? Because it's so about your reaction to what is happening. And we really focus on that a lot. I've worked with so many directors who are like, I just want to see the reaction. Show me the reaction. Make the reaction bigger. It becomes a real listening exercise too. And so that's a really great exercise as an actor to do when you step onto a set because you're listening, but now you have to really show how you're listening. Like, how am I integrating what is happening in here? I think the thing for most of the roles that are available to my age group right now in microdramas. So again, I'm 51. I look a little younger on screen, so I'm a bit of in a gray area, but we tend to play the evil stepmom or the nice mom or the evil boss. If I want, I can try to find a little subtle difference per character, but on paper, the characters tend to be very, very similar. So I do, as an actor, try to find something different to play around with every time I come in and give myself something different to drop into. I'll give her a secret sometimes, like, nobody's ever going to know this, but if ever anybody did, what would be her secret in this scene? I sort of like to play with that. But something for me as an actor on any project, any set, is that I always go in wanting to work on something in my craft, whether it's a camera technique, something about lighting, just something I know I want to work on in my craft. And I always know I'm going to learn something new. And I never know what it's going to be until I learn it on that project, walk away from it. with that.
Yeah, what do you learn? Is anything you learned?
Oh my goodness, so many things. I learned that I'm very emotional. Like if I'm actually physically feeling the sadness in a scene and I'm very emotional, I have a difficult time getting sound out. So I have to find a way to modify depending on the scene if it requires me to do a lot of like speaking or yelling. I have to not let myself get super emotional. I would never have known that unless I'd had that crazy wild scene in that microdrama. That one time I watched my child drown. You don't always need to be feeling something for it to be registering on screen. You know, so often what you think is transferring to camera isn't. And so it can be very helpful to go through this process because it is so quickly to be able to watch yourself on the monitor, watch yourself in playbacks. Just learned a lot through that kind of thing. But as far as like performing for vertical microdramas, there are so many new things that one learns, like whether it's don't walk into the frame saying your line, hit your mark before your line comes out of your mouth, how to really find the light in your frame. That becomes extremely important because the frame is so tight. So really working with the light, really using all of your like 360 senses while you're performing. There's so much.
Say if someone who has some experience in acting and wants to tap into microdrama industry, what's your suggestion?
Oh goodness. Well, I think it depends on where you live, of course. Obviously, if you're living in an area that doesn't have a lot of production, that can be a bit challenging. We're still in a time, I think, here in North America where you can self-submit. When I was doing my own self-submission, I found every single production company in my town who were making vertical microdramas, and I submitted all my materials to everybody. I submitted to our casting directors. My rep at the time was not so interested in microdramas, so it was fine with me self-submitting. Now, most of our breakdown services will post auditions, and so of course your agent can submit you. I worked really hard with my agent after they were finally on board with microdramas and realized they should take them seriously. So we had a spreadsheet of like every single platform, every single service production company that was service producing for them. And I said, just submit me to everybody. And I kind of educated them. I think it's really good to know what the material is. So watching soap operas, watching telenovelas can be actually very educational from the material standpoint and kind of the scenario that you may be asked to play out to also the performance. Because if you watch a soap opera and you watch what they do at the dun dun dun, you know, it's like moment, you can see what they do. There's like a real, you know, it's like a thing that you have to do or like a right, like there's a reason why they do that at the end of the scenes. You can really pick up a lot of great camera techniques by what and performance techniques by watching soap operas and telenovela. And then of course, you know, knowing where you would be marketable. Now, it still very much is a look and a sound as far as, you know, the supporting and the leads go. And there's a certain age range as well. So, you know, to know where you would fit, just like in traditional film and television, but to know where you would be cast is important. And then for actors who are not repped, I think, or even if you are repped, you know, go and get some stylized headshots that are really specific to these kinds of characters. And put together a little reel if you don't already have one. You know, shoot some scenes, get your hands on some microdrama scripts. They're out there; you can find them, um, or even some sort of similar like the telenovela and soap opera, and build a little platform for yourself. You know, where you can start showing yourself, and definitely take your Instagram seriously. Build that Instagram, build that relationship with the public as much as you can, because those numbers really can help.
Some people say short drama tend to be overacting, and what's your perspective on that?
Well, again, watch a telenovela or a soap opera. I mean, that's as big as it gets, right? Yes, I think there's a fine line between an exaggerated performance, like a big emotional performance, and something that veers into campy and over the top. They always tell us in acting school, go big first so a director knows they can bring you down. And it's funny, in this case, you want to go big so that they can see that you can go big. And sometimes they want you to be even bigger. But again, I think if you understand the origin of the microdrama, which again is the telenovela and the soap opera, or if if you've ever read any Harlequin romances or like a Jackie Collins, who's an icon, those are the original microdramas. And so in order for that kind of material to really translate to the screen, it kind of does have to be a little bit bigger.
Let's pause for a second. Imagine you are in a crowded marketplace. Vendors selling cakes, jewelry, all kinds of things. And you are one of the vendors trying to sell a story. What kind of story will you tell? And more importantly, how do you keep people stop listening and actually pay? That's the narrative logic of short drama. I explain this in my book, Short Drama Writing 101. Write what platforms want. It's available on Payhip, Amazon, and Google Playbooks. Now let's back to the video.
You often speak publicly about evolution of vertical microdramas. Could you share some insights on how the format is evolving?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think at the beginning, we were working with a lot of younger producers who maybe had never done traditional film and TV or even had done indie film, and they were just sort of trying to produce these scripts with a lot of times actors who'd never acted before. There were no, city permits. There was no insurance. It was just people were just trying to make these jobs happen to produce this material. I remember when I went to my very first vertical microdrama audition, even, it was not a normal audition. Like it was pretty funny. In this big black box, there was a loud fan on top of me. There were a bunch of people running around the whole entire time, and my reader had a face mask on, so I couldn't hear her, but she wasn't looking at me. She was just walking around with her script, and and they were like, make it bigger. So, and it was just well, the time. And now, as I described, we have incredibly seasoned crew, a lot of very, some sophisticated talent who've trained. Even our emerging talent base now is becoming, experienced rapidly. Our crews are. I just got a T4, which is, a paper you need for your tax purposes. Like we have above board companies now that are getting insurance, that are getting the right city permits. So from a production standard standpoint, we've absolutely seen an evolution. And then, of course, because of that, the quality of a lot of our projects now, our budgets have gone up. The quality of the product is broadcast quality network level. And now, of course, we have, and this is what I do with Monica at Type A Media, we have a lot of traditional film and television professionals who've been, in the space, in their space for decades, who are now really wanting to understand the format, learn how to adapt it, learn how to get into it. And we see, of course, networks and legacy studios launching their divisions, Netflix, Disney, Lifetime. So we've come from something that, it's of course hard to say, but we've come from something that originated in your country that now we've sort of, we talk about with the scripts that we localize them to shoot them here. But I feel almost like we have localized and now domesticized this thing that now we've created a system and a skill set for that is becoming our own here in North America, but globally its own, where we have now regions that have created their own communities, and are now starting to develop original IP. And so it's become something, and I'm very fascinated by that evolution.
Short drama in China that originates from web novels.
Yeah.
It got a gene of web novel and TikTok. So when you go to different countries, I think this storytelling will combine with local storytelling. For example, you mentioned about soap operas or telenovelas, they were combined,
Mhm.
so they will have a new format or storytelling.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see how networks and studios take this format and adapt it to their audience. We don't know if it will work or not yet. We don't know what that will look like. We hear a lot of, at least here in North America, we hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I just want to make it better. We can make it better." But it's like, but it's not broken. It doesn't need fixing, and it works. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what will happen, when Netflix wants to do their own vertical microdrama. Is it going to be an actual microdrama, or is it going to be a thriller in the microdrama format, which would be, movie of the week length, chopped up into 50 to 60 episodes, 1.5 to 2 minutes each with a hook, spike, cliffhanger, you know, could work. It might not. So I'm very curious to see what will happen.
I'm very curious to see as well. But thriller would definitely work. In China, we have half male-oriented stories, half female-oriented stories, and
Oh,
those
yeah.
CEO romance stories,
Mm,
just a part of the female-oriented stories. So there are
right.
a lot of to explore, like horror, thrillers,
Yeah.
or yeah, family dramas. I never see any family
Mm.
dramas.
I do have a theory right now about why our current audience here, and something that people do ask me about is, Alicia, how do you as a woman feel about the kinds of roles that you play? I tend to be one of the aggressors towards a female, like I'm the older bully. Not always, but sometimes. And also, why aren't there more lead roles for women my age? And I have led. They're two separate questions, but they do kind of relate to the same thing. And I think, right now our top two sort of performing storylines are werewolves, but also the young girl who's bullied and then is rescued by the beautiful boy, and in the end she wins everything. She's redeemed. She goes from being very naive and vulnerable to being very strong and confident. And her aggressors, who are oftentimes women but sometimes men, they all lose. I like thinking of entertainment and storytelling as a really incredible opportunity to teach empathy, to really hold a mirror up to the audience member to say, hey, can you feel what this person is feeling? And can it make you walk out of here wanting to treat somebody differently? And I really feel like that's what right now the microdramas do. There's this young girl who needs help, who's having a horrific time. And in the end, she prevails. The bad guys always lose. I can reconcile with that, that aspect of the storytelling. Can walk out of this going, "Ugh, I would hate to be treated like that," or I could never, I will stand up for somebody the next time I see them being treated poorly. Then I think microdramas have done a really good thing. I also think that the audience, at least the Western audience, potentially is someone who, when they were younger and see themselves as that young girl and are kind of reliving their trauma, but living that redemption arc, almost like to say, I wish that that's what had happened to me. And that's what I love about watching the story, is that I put myself in there and in a way kind of heal my past. So I'm not sure that they really are ready to see a lot of stories about themselves at this age, like my age, because that would be a very probably different kind of a story. Mind you, when I've led, I was also bullied in that role. But anyways, we talk a lot about the material and how women are treated. At least we talk about that here in the West a lot. But I think that's something to consider. And also for female actors to consider in this space too, because there are a lot of unsavory situations that especially the female performers have to perform. And it's a big ask of the performer to do that. And for actors wanting to get into the space, I think it's something they need to consider.
Mention about the storytelling. Actually, those vampires do for very younger. But actually, in China, we do have a lot of family, like office dramas. Family dramas, people are divorcing and they're fighting over something. I think the story should be expanded. I was expecting to see more
Yes.
of these stories.
What are your favorites?
Actually, I'm not a big microdrama fan, but I do study them. So I normally watch top 50 at least to see what's the trending right now, to study
Right.
at least from episode 1 to episode 10 before the paywall.
Mhm.
Normally you watch
Mhm.
about 1 to 2 episodes to know exactly what the story is. And you are the co-founder of Vertical Film and Short Alliance. Could you
Mhm.
tell what this organization is and what it's aimed to do?
So I was saying earlier in the conversation, when I came back from Los Angeles, after really seeing the level of professionalism on that set, on my sets up here, and realizing that so many people's livelihoods were being sustained at the same time, we had our performers union really wanting to get involved. And at the time, I was aware that if our unions did get involved and shut projects down to try to force them into the union, that this work would disappear. It would just go somewhere else. It didn't need to live here. And at the same time, I felt very strongly that what we were building was something, there were a lot of people who had things to say about the space that were not very, very kind, and not very informed. We had a lot of naysayers who were like, you're in a microdrama? That's ridiculous. Nobody's ever going to hire you after that, or they won't take you seriously. And yet these people had never watched a microdrama, and they had never been on a microdrama set. They had no idea that, we had the director of photography who had just been on Peaky Blinders in Los Angeles flying up here to do just had no clue. And Monica and I were very also passionate about wanting to elevate the safety and the standards of these sets to add to the professionalism. So Monica and I came together to co-found the Vertical Film and Short Series Alliance really for those reasons. We wanted to elevate the status. We wanted to create a level of professionalism that matched the professionals who were on these sets. We wanted to create some safety standards and again, raise the bar. And we wanted to educate the traditional film and television industry at large what these were, who was making them, and what the future could look like. And that's really why we formed it. We did that. When did we launch? We formed it in April of last year. We launched in July.
What's your activity do? Are you going for public speaking or?
Oh my goodness, we do a lot of speaking, through the VFSSA. Initially, when we came together, we wanted to bring the community here in Vancouver together just to really recognize and acknowledge that we were a community. We have created the V Seal, which is a certification that productions can apply for, that then they can obtain the seal, and that goes through Breakdown Services. It tells agents, that tells actors that this production is abiding by certain safety standards. They've got city permits for filming. They've got insurance. That was really important to us to want to do. We're just in the process of finalizing what that looks like, but we did put that together. We've been talking to every single film commission across Canada, province by province, to talk to them about making permits as well as tax credits readily available for these productions. We really want them to be able to qualify for any kind of tax credit, just like a regular film and television production here in Canada. And we've just been advocating for more awareness around what it is that we're doing. So we've been doing quite a bit.
Do you think gender has played any role in your experience in short film industry in subtle ways, either positive or challenging ways?
I do, but I can speak to it from my age, because in general, women are portrayed, as I discussed earlier. We have a very particular place, a very particular part to play in the story that we're telling, or we're the aggressor. I think being an older female actor has limits us right now, because we don't have a lot of stories where our age, the kinds of stories that happen for women my age, like you mentioned, divorce, we're seeing it. It's just that the girls that are playing those roles are a lot younger. It will be nice to see that evolve, I think, as things change. But I don't think it's any different than traditional film and TV at all, actually. We're mostly playing the same kinds of roles. Maybe have less of the woman who saves herself. I think that will change. We've seen some of those stories. People talk about the pay gap right now, where the boys are getting paid way more than the girls. Certainly, the leads get paid more than supporting leads. That's normal, and to be expected because your workload is less than when you're leading. I think that, and I mentioned this earlier, a lot of what the female leads have to deal with in these stories is far more than what the males have to do. We take on the emotional load, and then we take on the physical load. There should be more equal pay.
Actually, I mentioned this when we talk about in another interview because I think maybe because it depends on the market because right now it's still female-oriented stories. So those are female audience. Their
Mm-hmm.
projection are on those male actors. So the
Yes.
male lead. So
Yeah.
that's why there are more demand for this male lead. So that's
Yes.
why it's higher. I think if you ultimately the increase of the salary of female lead would be male-oriented short dramas. We don't see any of this right now, I think. Well, not many
I think they're coming
experience.
out. But I think, I understand why the boys, they're the selling feature, right? So they're bankable. But I think from a work perspective, from a labor, and this is maybe as an actor, your instrument is your body and your mind. And really good actors are really good at their using their minds and their bodies to do their job. And we do all kinds of crazy things. And these microdramas are very demanding, sometimes physically. We do a lot of moving, I played one role where, by the way, I had more lines than the lead. I was the aggressor. I played her mom. And for 3 straight days, I was kicking and punching. I didn't get the script ahead of time. They never told me that it would be this physical. So I had no prep. And I was also being thrown to the floor, thrown on a couch. At the time, we did not have a stunt coordinator. We do now. It was a cement floor. Like, it was dangerous and very physical. I've watched some girls who are younger actors who are not trained in what happens when I cry and cry and I do something emotional. You can actually traumatize yourself, or you can activate your trauma. Like, there's so much more than just walking in and crying or whatever it is. Like, you really are using, this is your instrument, and your instrument, if it gets harmed, you can't use it. It's impacted, it needs to be restored. It's very different than when you're hired as a camera operator and your instrument is your camera. I mean, it's also how you use it, but it's just very different. So to understand what is required of an actor, like what your job is, it's not just to go look pretty and say lines and be believable. There are so many things you have to know how to do with your instrument. The female instrument in a microdrama is overworked. The male instrument is not really. So those guys get to walk off the set and, go about their day or their night, go work out, go to bed. But the women are like, you've just gone through so much. You may have bruises. Like, my point is, Maggie, that in that sense, female actors should be paid at least as much as the male actors, if not sometimes more. So
Mm.
I hope we'll get there. I mean, you hear it all the time in traditional film and TV. Like, actors in LA are talking about it all the time. They're like, yeah, I just found out that Chris Hemsworth made $20 million on my movie. And guess what? I only made 5. But you're co-stars. So it exists in the real world. It also exists in every industry. We all know that. Men typically make more than women across the board. So it's not reserved to microdrama space. But
How do you see the future of microdrama?
I think in the next 6 to 12 months, we will definitely see domestic. So I mean, networks and studios that are based here in North America establish their own divisions. I think we will see experiments in the frame, perhaps not just 9:16. You know, I've shot some verticals horizontally, so that was interesting. I think we might see more licensing and acquisition deals, not just service production for platforms that exist in China or Japan, India, Korea, Ukraine. Maybe a little more experimental, but I think we'll definitely see a lot more of that. And I hope that we'll see an adaptation from all of our major film and television streamers who will want to make it their own, and that we'll be able to continue to do both. We'll get to work on domestic stuff, and I would still love to work for the original platforms because I kind of love some of what we're doing also. So I hope it doesn't change too much, but of course it will.
Actually, I interviewed a director, Chinese director, a few days back. And, in China, we started from vertical, like 5 to 6 episodes first, vertical
Mm.
ones. And then some OTT platforms experience horizontal ones and about 10 to 15 minutes
Oh, wow.
horizontal short drama. And then we changed into vertical and then expanded to 65 episodes. And then
Oh.
when exporting overseas, what they see is the vertical about 65 episodes.